What the hell? Chapter 3. A lawyer walks into a bar. Are you out of your mind? The general screamed at the prince while he swung and knocked out yet another attacker who came at them. His Majesty managed to drag him yet again into his favorite bar and yet another bar fight. She's a still living human, what exactly were you thinking when you did this? Amon looked back at his old teacher and realized with a smile that Azazel was just about the only non-royal who still spoke to him that way. He was no longer the eager, wide-eyed student who stood before him years ago. As a prince of hell, he had extensive training and lessons with the old monster but was never acknowledged by him as a grown devil. At over 2 meters Azazel was a match for his physical size and build but could not be matched when it came to both his magic and martial abilities. Seeing his old teacher at work now fighting hand-to-hand, Amon considered himself lucky to have been mostly knocked out by his magic attacks back in his training days. Azazel had dealt with the last of the rude newcomers who decided to attack them and turned back to Amon and kept scolding the prince, never missing a beat in the process. Try as he did, Amon could not help by smiling at his friend's unwavering character. Seeing him smile, of course, ignited the ferocity burning within his friend even more. The bar workers were already silently clearing the unconscious bodies from the floor, Amon noticed as he raised his hand to stop his friend's advance. You were not there with me, but be assured my friend that your teachings were, he said as he looked into Azazel's eyes trying to calm him. She did not have to help the helpless, but she did, and at a great personal cost as it turns out, Amon said to Azazel, his anger now evident in his voice as he thought back upon it. Such a rarity nowadays, don't you think so, my teacher? Azazel had not heard that title being mentioned for a while and instinctively understood where Amon was heading with this line of thought. While this situation was highly irregular, to say the least, the prince's judgment was of course correct. The teacher was indeed proud of his pupil, but concerned about this guest of theirs and what could happen just due to her being there. So now? He asked Amon, not sure what to expect after being informed of the prince's +1 on his return trip from the human world. Now? Amon laughed, you get me another drink, 'cause that rude unconscious demon with the broken horns behind you spilled mine. Azazel tried but failed not to laugh at how much heart his prince had in his decisiveness. Nice try, your majesty, said Azazel. His laugh now turned into a smile as he signaled to the bartender to pour the next round of drinks. I mean the human you brought back with you and have hidden in the castle, since the general drove his point home. The older demon noticed at once that the usually quick-on-his-feet prince was suddenly lost in thoughts, and a hint of a smile could clearly be seen on his lips. Could it be? In all the years he has known the prince, the topic has never come up, and he now suspected a different scenario and outcome that he had never even considered. The general made a mental note to consult with someone anonymously. Of course, as funny enough, this was the one topic that he was still somewhat helpless about. The waiter arrived with a new round of drinks, and it brought them both back to reality. Amon lifted his newly filled glass and looked at his friend as he finally found his voice. She is resting, he told Azazel, who immediately noticed the change in his prince's voice. The cynical confident tone was now absent and replaced by this frighteningly calm and dreamy demeanor that he was not known for. So what is the plan once she is all rested? The general asked softly, seeing now that there is more than meets the eye with Amon's intentions. Amon took even longer to answer this inquiry, which further cemented Azazel's assumption that the prince was indeed smitten. Noticing, at last, the investigative look on his teacher's face, Amon quickly pulled back his shoulders and made a visible effort to regain his composure. I was hoping to give her a moment to catch her breath before she went back to the human world, the prince replied, sounding more like himself. Amon knew that he did not have an answer for his friend, as he himself did not know what he would do next. That is partly why he wanted to meet with Azazel in this place of all others, hoping that his teacher could once again provide him with guidance. Amon gave his old friend a look that signaled just how helpless he was feeling. The general laughed and slapped the prince's shoulder while being careful enough to not knock the drink out of his hand. It wasn't covered in our lessons. Amon laughed at the situation, as his teacher had taught him to do whenever he was stressed out. She is mesmerizing, he thought, stating the obvious issue was a good place to start. Being physically close to her seems to make it difficult for me to think straight, and yet I am drawn to her in a way that I cannot resist. What is happening to me, Az? Is this magic? Asked the prince, looking more lost than his teacher had ever seen him. At this, Azrael did not wish to embarrass his prince further and did his absolute best not to burst out laughing. His prince's argument was again correct. He had taught him about everything except that one subject. Azrael had taught Amon how to use his anger as a power source as well as how to forge patience out of thin air once none was left, but they did not cover the other emotions. Satan, give me strength, he muttered to himself quietly, before taking a much-needed sip of his drink. He was grappling internally with how to approach this matter when decided that more information was needed first. Go ahead and describe her to me. He asked Amon, but was not ready for the reaction that he got. She's and her, is just it's hard to explain because of her, when Amon tried to explain. Azazel gasped as he watched one of the sharpest beings in existence miserably fail to complete a sentence. Do you have an image of her that you can show me? He asked, and as if in the queue of the night's events, the main door to the bar swung open and the ladies walked in. Oh dear, you're in trouble, the general told the prince with a wide smile after seeing who came into the bar. So this is hell? Maya asked Victoria as they both looked down from the balcony at the sprawling metropolis far below them. The enormous castle was built high above the city on what looked like an equally tall pedestal, and it all looked like some sort of black shining stone lined with silver, just like the room she woke up in. The castle itself, as beautiful as it was, made her quite uneasy, and considering this was the literal house of Satan, she could understand why. Trying to put that feeling out of her mind, she tried to think of anything else. Maya wondered how they would get down to the city, and as if feeling her unspoken question, her guardian eased her mind with the most comforting voice as she could muster. The princess will be along shortly with our ride. Maya could not help but notice that her guardian smiled while saying so. The demon cleared her throat, indicating that there was more yet to be said, and she realized that there should be some sort of briefing before going down to the city. Not only was she technically in a foreign land, but she was very much still alive, and she realized it would make her stick out like a Roman candle. Victoria smiled softly at her, seeing her attentiveness, and decided to keep her words short and brief so as to not scare this human that she had grown somewhat fond of. First thing is first, the silver bracelet that you have received is, in fact, a multi-purpose device and is semi-sentient. It reads your thoughts and feelings and reacts to them accordingly. It will act as a shield in two ways. Projectiles will simply bounce off of you no matter their power and size, and any unwanted slower contract will immediately engage an outwards moving shield around you, giving you a meter of clear space. You are now immune to any form of sickness, poison, heat, or cold. Most importantly, Victoria trailed off for a second, looking at their most important guest. This bracelet is also hard-coded through you to me. This means that Satan forbids if anyone get the silly idea that they may touch you inappropriately in any way, and I will know it and be there to assist. Maya could tell that Victoria had made an effort to say that last part with the sweetest voice she had, but shuddering slightly, she could only imagine what that really meant. Am I going to war? She asked her guardian, feeling a bit anxious from the foreboding militant vibe she was getting from this so far. I am just preparing you, my dear. You see, no living human has done this before, but you will be fine, Victoria reassured her, placing her hand gently on her shoulder. The prince himself created that bracelet for you and just wanted to cover all of the bases, as you would say. She loved the sports reference, as she was sure that sport in particular was invented after her time in the world of the living. It showed her that Victoria was trying to make an effort, and for her that was absolutely endearing, and she felt herself growing fond of the demoness. I've made a friend in hell, Maya noted to herself, mentally ticking off a box on the list she never thought to have. Smiling wide with the warmth of this new sensation, it was a few seconds before she again found her steady voice. So the prince himself made this for me? Maya asked, holding up her arm to better view the prince's handiwork. The closer she looked at her gift, the more detailed craftsmanship she noticed about it that she hadn't seen before. She could swear that it was now radiating energy, and before she could ask, her friend, as if again reading her thoughts, confirmed her suspicions. It was made by the prince, and as such carries the royal seal of hell. None would dare to even think any harm to you. Hearing that, Maya subconsciously raised her eyebrow and let out a low whistle tone. It was a habit she had ever since she was a child whenever she was impressed. He thought of everything, didn't he? Oh, you have no idea, the demon chuckled. In the very unlikely event that you are thrown from a great height, you will float down like a feather and land eventually without harm. Upon hearing that, something long dormant switched on within Maya, her secret duality where she grew up as both a quiet measured professional and an unhinged adrenaline junkie. Very few had gotten to see her other side, and when she did do crazy and stupid stunts she tended to go big or go home. To Victoria's bewilderment, Maya removed her platform shoes and then held them tightly by their straps. Instinctively Maya bent lower facing the balcony's edge and began to arch her right leg, getting ready to sprint. A sudden realization came to her guardian and she began to reach out for her, but it was already too late. Maya's long legs made short work of the distance to the balcony's edge, and before Victoria could react she saw her friend take a swan dive and disappear out of sight. Really? I didn't see that coming, the demon remarked out loud to herself, before she snapped her fingers and vanished from the balcony in a puff of black smoke. Maya couldn't tell the exact distance to the ground due to the rushing air in her eyes that was partially blinding her, but it looked like she was still a few kilometers up. After a few more seconds, the mentioned security feature had yet to kick in, and suddenly the cold hand of fear gripped her, and as soon as it did she felt it happen. A sudden deceleration in her descent turned her terminal drop into a soft rocking motion, like a feather floating through the air. Skydiving was on her to-do list that she had no time to get done. She screamed with primal pleasure. The extreme sports weekends away from the city fed her needs, but those had gotten fewer and fewer until eventually they were gone. The work had to come first every time, and she knew it. Some greedy corporate bastards just didn't take a day off, so in her mind neither could she. Maya knew she would have to apologize to Victoria once she found her again, but this opportunity was just too good to miss, she thought as the widest smile was fixed on her face. She was obviously surprised to feel a tapping on her shoulder and laughed as she turned and saw that it was her friend who was now slowly floating down beside her. This is amazing, Maya shouted to her friend, and as an immediate afterthought added, why didn't I float right away? She noticed right away that Victoria was not amused. Matter of fact, she looked a bit disappointed and hurt. Twisting her body in the air, Maya managed to face the demon and draw her into a hug. I'm sorry if I worried you with the way I acted, but didn't you ever just want to have some fun? She whispered into Victoria's chest. Maya, looking up, could see that her friend smiled at the question. Of course she did. Once, long before her hands were bloodied, she was a young English girl who just wanted to play in the sun. Then tragedy struck, and not long after the Terror of London was born. Just as quick as the smile came, Maya saw it vanish from her guardian's face, and it was replaced with a look of anguish as the memories of past horrors she lived through as a human came back to claw at her. She didn't even notice how close they were to the ground until they gently touched down and the continuous motion sensation stopped. Victoria was shedding the same black tears again, but they looked even more disturbing looking now against her new much paler complexion. The aura around her friend was now visible and rapidly growing darker, shooting off black arcs of what Maya assumed was some form of hell lightning. Victoria? She looked at her new friend and was horrified by the pain she was in and began to cry at her inability to help her. Everyone get back, her friend cried out in her booming demonic voice, but looking around Maya could see no one in the empty town square below the castle where they landed. What the F did they do to you? She clearly recognized post-traumatic stress disorder when she saw it through her many pro bono cases working in vulnerable communities. Knowing she could not physically do anything to stop a demon, she desperately appealed to the traumatized young woman inside the demon. Victoria, please, no one is there. There is no danger, come back to me, sister, she cried out to Victoria. Her voice was infused and her pain at her helplessness. Once she said it, she could feel the guardian's posture relax for a second as the lightning around them began to slowly wither away. Relieved, Maya looked up to see her friend look down and meet her gaze. She had stopped crying and had an inquisitive look on her face. Sister? We are sisters? The demon asked with the black tears still streaking her face. Yes, yes, we are. Maya did not hesitate before answering, while carefully wiping away the black tears that her newly titled sister had cried. She had always wanted a sister, but just never imagined that it would be a powerful Victorian-era super-traumatized demon girl. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Victoria smiled wide, and for a moment Maya just stared at her new sister's smudged makeup face, and then burst out laughing, as that was like watching a horror film poster trying to look all cute and adorable. After a few seconds, the demoness joined in the laughter, and a few more after that the sisters quietly hugged. As she held on to her new and unexpected family addition, Maya thought of the old saying, "Who guards the guardsman?" "I do," she thought to herself, smiling, "that's my job." "Enough now," said Victoria, as she gently nudged Maya away, and with a snap of her fingers, the dress and makeup were restored to flawless condition. As if again sensing her question before it was said, Victoria snapped her fingers and a mirror popped into existence and hovered at Maya's eye level so that she could see that her makeup was again also flawless. "All good?" the demon asked her, and was awaiting her reply. With a few quick touch-ups, Maya was satisfied and signaled that they were ready. "You have to teach me that trick with the makeup restoration, it would kill at parties." The demon looked amused at the request and then uncertain. "Do you promise not to do anything rash if I tell you something?" the guardian asked quietly. Given what just happened, Maya got why the demon would hesitate. "Pinky promise," Maya cried out, wrapping her small finger around Victoria's to emphasize the seriousness of her promise. Victoria looked her over for another few seconds before agreeing to share her knowledge. "You see, my dear, with that bracelet you can perform your own magic, including that trick that you wanted to learn. In modern terms, I guess that you can say that there is a whole library of magic inside that device you now wear, which, by the way, only you can remove. In time, I'm sure that you will learn and make good use of it." "Maya? Are you okay?" Victoria was caught off guard by the blank look on Maya's face, which is usually quite expressive. "I can perform magic?" was all that she managed to utter after a few seconds. "Yes," the demon quietly confirmed. Maya did not get a chance to process that major bit of information, as at that second the ground around them shook as a massive purple dragon landed on the other side of the square not far from them. Up until this point, Maya learned that hell was real, complete with devils and demons. So when she saw the dragon look down at them, her brain told her that she should be afraid, but she wasn't. Instead of fear, she was flooded with another emotion altogether. What was this? She asked herself as she uncontrollably started moving towards the dragon. She quickly thought and understood that this wasn't magic, but her fascination. She will pet that dragon. While realizing just how ridiculous she sounded, but couldn't help herself. The great beast moved its massive head and looked at her approaching figure, but otherwise did not move. What happened honestly should not have surprised her, but it did. As she got closer, she instinctively raised her hands palm up to the beast to indicate that she was not a threat. It was then that her bracelet began to glow with a soft violet light. She was surprised when the beast reacted immediately to the bracelet and bent his head low towards her. It moved its head slower the closer it came to her until the tip of its nose touched the open raised palm of her hand. Not even in her dreams could she fantasize about something like this. She could feel a light vibration coming from the dragon and with great amusement realized that it was purring much like a cat. Did this mean the beast accepted her? Or was this just more magic from the bracelet she wore? "You are so beautiful," Maya said to the dragon, placing both hands on its nose to caress it. "You are not so bad looking yourself." She froze as she realized the metallic-sounding voice was coming from inside her head. She slowly looked up at the dragon's face with amazement and saw it wink at her playfully. Of course, she smiled again, remembering what she knew about dragon lore, but realized quickly that she knew nothing for certain except she was facing the real deal right now. "What is your name?" she asked out loud, not sure how else to communicate apart from directly. "Mannix. His name is Mannix." The answer came from behind her this time. Looking behind her, Maya saw the demon elegantly hovering towards them. Maya heard the dragon shriek inside her head, and it quickly retreated from the approaching Victoria. "It's okay," she called out to the dragon, but it would not stop until it reached the edge of the square. Maya looked at Victoria, awaiting some sort of explanation, but the demon just said something in language that she didn't understand. The sounds of something heavy and wet touching down behind her made Maya turn around again. A hill-sized pile of assorted meat cuts had materialized out of thin air and hit the ground halfway between them and Mannix. Like a hungry piranha sensing movement in the river, the dragon charged onto the meat pile and began to feast. Some would have retreated to the sight of a dragon eating, but Maya found it disturbingly adorable. "I will say this, my dear, I can see why you drew his interest," Victoria commented with what looked at long last like an actual non-forced smile. "Who's he? The prince?" She grilled the demon, but only got another playful wink. "Mannix is now your familiar." Victoria changed the subject quickly, and it worked as Maya could only repeat her in a question-like tone. "He is my familiar? I have a dragon familiar?" Maya asked as she felt her heart almost skip several beats from all the updates she was getting. "You would have been introduced earlier and flown him down here had you not jumped off the ledge. It was still worth it," she retorted at the demon. Not a moment later a second purple dragon landed in the town square, much more elegantly than Mannix. Once the second dragon folded its wings, Maya noticed that Princess Agrit was its rider. The princess quickly dismounted her dragon and walked right towards them looking ready to fight. "Is it just me, or does the princess look angry?" A second look confirmed it. "Oh yeah, she's mad. I managed to anger a royal in hell." Watching Argith draw closer, Maya noticed that she had changed her wardrobe and now looked more like a dominatrix than an assassin. She wasn't sure how to react here, so at the last second, Maya raised her hands in self-defense against the royal. She did not expect the laughter that followed, nor the bear hug from the princess. "Your Highness," Victoria called out to the Argith, bringing her attention to the fact she was breaking their guest. "Oh, I'm sorry," said the princess as she placed Maya back down to her feet. Gasping and coughing, Maya gave the princess the thumbs-up sign to ease her worries. "You are one crazy bee. A running swan dive from the castle balcony?" Argith screamed at her. "I knew that I liked you as soon as I saw you, and I get why he does, too," the princess said and winked at her. "Okay, what's the deal with all the winking?" she asked herself, sensing an unseen ploy in the works. A surprise party? And once again, who was this he they were talking about? "See that pub over there?" Argith pointed to a two-story building at the edge of the square where some rough-looking unconscious patrons were being kicked out by the staff. "Of course," Maya said and smiled while shaking her head. "Please lead the way, Victoria." Argith beckoned the demon, and as she did they followed her. As they walked, Argith tapped Maya's shoulder and spoke directly into her mind. "I blocked everyone else from your mind for a quick spell. I'll be quick before Victoria starts asking questions about why she can no longer feel your mind. The trauma is very much real, as I think you have already learned about our Victoria." Maya took Argitha's hand into her own and squeezed tightly to quietly express how shocked she was. I know. Argitha's voice resumed its echo inside her head. "My brother felt her on her way down here. That has never happened with a human before, or since in all of Hell's existence. Amon found her at the border crossing gates, where none of the demons stationed there was willing to come near her. Apparently, she was already cursed, like scary cursed before she ever got here, and this place was just the next step in her scheduled pain pilgrimage. In her desperation to protect others who shared her misfortune, Victoria became black magic personified. One of the most powerful witches to ever grace the British Isles. She would not apologize for the deaths of those who endangered the weak and died by her hand, so she was cast down to us." Instead of more torture, Amon lifted her to her feet and looked deep into her eyes, where he saw all that she saw and did in her life within seconds. "I remember he told me later on that heaven had made a mistake and this was now Hell's good fortune. You know, it can take up to hundreds of years even for the highest demons to earn a title in Hell. That day Amon bestowed 3 different titles upon our Victoria, and her already frightening powers just lost all proportion. It's ridiculous. The outburst you felt earlier was thankfully minimal. I have never in all her years here seen her smile until you got here." "Thank you, Maya." It was now Argitha's turn to squeeze her hand to indicate her gratitude. Maya nodded gently and smiled at the princess, who smiled back at her. Okay, so two last things. As you may have gathered, Amon is my brother and the one who got you here, and my sources tell me that he's at this bar now. The second thing is Victoria has a crush and I think that he's in there too. Argith pretended not to see the shocked smile on Maya's face as she swung the front doors open and they marched hand in hand into the bar. She quickly scanned the room as the excited nerd in her equated this moment with the famous Star Wars cantina scene. She didn't remember much apart from their quick encounter, apart from him being tall and beautiful with long silver hair. She could pinpoint him until Argith tapped on her shoulder and pointed out to Victoria. Maya saw the demon float in the direction of a dark corner in the corner of the bar, where someone was staring back at her. Amon rose to his feet and bowed towards the ladies. A second figure rose to his feet next to Amon, and it seemed that he was Victoria's sole interest. Small sparks of the same black lightning that Maya saw before were coming out of the demon in all directions. Victoria then quickly gave the prince a quick bow, before turning her undivided attention to the figure next to him. Who is that? Maya asked Argith, looking at the old soldier. That is Azazel, and depending on what day it is he can be either the general, the judge, the archmage, and of course Amon's teacher. Also, as you can see, Victoria seems to press all of his buttons too. It's quite sad actually, Argith commented. They both have no game and do nothing about it. Let us go and change that, Maya called to Argith and headed for the bar, feeling all eyes were now on them. The closer she got, the louder she could hear her own heartbeat. They were both wearing what looked like official uniforms, which was already one of her turn-ons. He was a good head taller than her, which she also liked. Before she could say anything, Azazel transformed his outward appearance to one of a younger man, as if to match Victoria's new appearance. His powerful aura was now visible as Victoria's and appeared to be a form of cold blue flames. Between the lightning and the flames, they were creating quite the spectacle of themselves. Will you get a girl a drink? She heard Victoria ask Azazel and knew that her friend would be just fine. She then turned to face Amon and found his golden eyes already piercing through her. I'm happy to see that you feel better. Amon spoke quietly as he did not trust his voice not to betray him, and yet she heard him loud and clear. His voice was as soft and reassuring as she remembered it from that night. For several quiet seconds, Maya stared hard at Amon and fought hard to fight back wave after wave of different emotions. Snapping back into reality, she walked the few remaining steps towards him and pushed Amon back into his bar stool. Once he was seated, it was the perfect height for her, and she leaned in and softly kissed the prince, just as she had fantasized over the last day. From behind her, she could hear Victoria and Azazel getting rough together. It seemed like she managed to break the ice. Somewhere to her right, she could hear someone hitting on the princess. Good for them, she thought while she proceeded to show Amon her appreciation.